reminisces about the ancient days.
I
And the
remember-
ancient ones. Barn Street.
He had
Michael, tell us when it's on.
he had a kaleidoscope that he couldn't play with.
Whenever you see that red light,
It's on.
see that red light?
Oh, I thought it would be flickering.
I'm just remembering, just the outside of the Barnes house, the driveway, had, instead of a full driveway, it just had two narrow strips of pavement. We used to use it as race cars, starting points up at the top. Used to get Dave's little orange hot rod, remember the hot rod that Dad gave him? He gave someone for him. And used to race up and down the driveway. And on skates. Mom had flowers, lots and lots. She would be out there every spring. She made a mound. She had the only mound on Barn Street.
That seems unusual, doesn't it? She would have time to do that? How many kids did you have?
Well, I think, this was in her younger years. First of all, she was much younger. And she had a raised flower bed in the front of the house. Just on the side, on the front door was off center somewhat. And the wide length she raised up and would plant really vibrant colors. She did not mess around. Red reds, yellow yellows, orange marigolds, some mums for the fall. And we thought that was the greatest thing on the flower bed. Grandpa used to stop by regularly at Brian's house. Grandpa Jerzak. He bought for us, if you can imagine, those old style 50 tables that had like the artificial marble top.
Oh my God,
It was gray. This was a gray
Speckly?
marble. Yes.
like granite.
And
I think I
it had a
remember this
silver
one.
band.
Yeah, that was
around
ridged.
the edges.
Yeah.
And it had matching little upholstered chairs. And Grandpa got such a kick out of buying stuff for all the kids, and Dad would say, this isn't necessary. But Grandpa just loved it because we went wild. He brought over that little table and chairs, and we thought that was the greatest thing. He used to stop by regularly. He was retired. He left Ford Motor Company. After working 30 years as a police officer, he worked at Ford Motor Company. And he was retired in the 60s, when we lived, late 50s and in the 60s, when we lived on Barn Street. And he used to stop by maybe once a week, once every 2 weeks, and visit, like to sit with the kids. Yeah, we used
Did
to
he ever
sit
tell you
quite
any
often.
stories?
Grandpa, if you may not recall, because you were so young, but he was on the quiet side. We used to go over on Sundays quite often too. Their living room was impeccable. There was plastic.
I remember Grandma Jerzak's
Yes,
house.
Grandma had plastic over the living room couches, and they had the big old-fashioned 40s radio. It was like the main focus of the living room. That was maybe, what is that? Maybe 3.5 feet tall, 2.5 feet wide with big knobs. And they were right about your eye level when you went up to it, and had a lighted bar. And Grandma, we'd come and sit very carefully on the edge of the sofa. You know, we knew it was like a special place. And Grandpa's piano was there. And Grandpa's chair was Grandpa's chair. No one else sat in it. And he would sit in that chair, and he was very slender. And his big knees would poke up. And he'd sit back with his pipe and his newspaper and rustle that newspaper. And he would talk too much to us. And we'd stand by him and ask him questions, and he'd just nod very.
Stoic.
Yeah.
I remember I was afraid of him, that he was loving. I remember him being real tall, real thin, but yet he put you up on his lap and just let you be there. Let you be. You knew he enjoyed you. He enjoyed your company.
He did. Yes. You're right. He wasn't effusive. He wasn't one that talked at great length. But he knew. He'd say, "Mom," he'd call Grandma Mom. "What do we have for the children to eat?" And Grandma would be in there making chicken and cookies.
My favorite.
Yeah. He knew the things that really thrilled us, like only 31 flavors. And he wouldn't even say we were going there. We were just going for a walk, and we always ended up at 31 flavors. And get an ice cream there.
Right at the end of Technical Street.
But looking back, he must have enjoyed just watching us, because he would just sit and watch us go over to the radio and look at the lighted dial and pretend like no one's watching. We'd turn the knobs. He wouldn't say anything. He'd just sit back with his newspaper. He had to be aware of what's going on. Not not a man to show a great deal of emotion, but it certainly came out when he played the piano. He would come home from work as a police officer and go make a beeline right to his piano, which was right here by the front door, and bang on the piano. Large, dramatic pieces, a lot of vim and vigor.
He played the piano?
Oh, wonderfully well.
He played well?
Wonderfully well, yes. He was a superb pianist. Grandpa
Did
Joseph.
he take lessons or something like that?
I don't know, if, I believe he had, and he encouraged Dad to take piano. He wanted Dad to take piano as well. Well, of course, Dad wanted to take some type of musical instrument
Right.
and would have been very happy with piano, but because Grandpa pushed it on him so much, he played the accordion instead. And Grandpa thought of that as an inferior instrument.
It has piano section, keyboard section. Yeah.
Well, I guess the accordion is a little inferior to the piano. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
But Dad and I,
As far
when we
as
moved,
concerts.
it must have been, I must have been just about school age, and we went to visit Grandpa while he was, or I thought he was on the job. I did not know, I was not old enough to understand that he was a police officer who walked the beat. And he would stop at some little bar near his regular walk and go in for lunch. And I had thought that Grandpa was in a musical band of some sort because they had old honky-tonk piano there. And when he came in, he'd play the piano.
At lunchtime?
And yes, and there was someone else there that would play a little brass horn, and they'd make music, and I said, my grandpa does for a living. He plays
One of the
during
big
lunchtime.
bands,
Yeah, he was very, very musically inclined, but expressed himself more through music than he did verbally.
He's on top of it.
Very solemn man, kind of Abraham Lincolnish, if you can imagine, real bony structure, slender, real high cheekbones and deep set eyes. But he had told Grandma, very serious young man, when he left Czechoslovakia and went to America, they had been dating for some time, or seeing each other for some time, and the plans were at that time that they would get married. And Grandpa thought, well, now that he's going, Grandma had thought, since he's moving to the United States, she'd never seen him again. And he told her, I will send for you. I will be back. I will send for you and bring you to the United States. And Grandma said he did. She wasn't sure if he would or he wouldn't, but he did. He hadn't been here. Well, I can't recall the length of time, but it wasn't long. Perhaps a year. And Grandpa sent money for Grandma to come over. Met her.
And they weren't married yet?
They were not married yet. No.
So they let her go as a single woman?
Yeah, Grandma's family, the Gulises, now her mother was in West Virginia as well.
She
So
lied
what
about
kid-
her age. She had to be
Yes.
close to 100. Nobody was sure because even in her 90s, she lied about her age.
I wonder if it's
Amazing.
because they're not real definite on the date, now she's not certain of her date of birth. Sometimes her birthday is May 19th, sometimes it's May 20th.
That's our girl.
Yeah.
Yeah, she shifts with the wind.
Yeah.
Just don't know
So I
quite sure.
wonder if they don't have a definitive record of her date of birth and year of birth, and that may be why.
But Grandma's mother. Grandma says that her mother, she was
Grandma Gullis?
Grandma Goulas. She wasn't quite sure how old she really was.
So did Grandma Gullis come after Grandma did? To the US? So she was in West Virginia?
I'm not sure.
I know that her brother's
Her brother
from
Michael?
George.
Yeah, her brother too. They may have brought her mom and her two brothers over at a later time.
Grandma Jerzak's.
Yes,
And they worked in the coal mines.
yes, they did, in West
That's
Virginia.
lung disease and all.
There's still a huge Czechoslovakian population there
Yeah.
in West Virginia.
And came to Detroit at the prospect of a good job,
Oh,
Worked for
yeah,
Ford.
cars.
$5 a day. King's ransom in those days. A lot of good housing. Schools for the children were better here than they were there. The infrastructure was better in Detroit than in those smaller cities in West Virginia. We just did not have the services available. But Grandma always worked around the home. Rarely, so I can't think of any pastime she may have had other than crocheting.
Grandma Jerzak?
Yes. Grandma Jerzak.
She had 11 children. She did a lot of cooking. So She was always in the kitchen.
She
You
was
could hear her in the
always
kitchen.
in the kitchen.
Yeah.
And back in those times when nothing was wasted or everything took a great deal of time, she always had something to do, whether it was set the yeast out for the bread that she was making much later or the following day. And she used to make her own starch for her for ironing. She'd have little concoctions brewing all the time. Dinner was an early affair. She started that early in the day.
I remember when she would
But-
bread chicken and the leftovers, the leftover flour, she'd fry into fry cakes and we'd all line up. Because you'd get those first. I mean, they were just, before dinner was actually prepared, you'd be starving. And they had so much flavor. She'd like deep fry them. And they'd be like little potato, or little flour cakes.
Wow.
They'd be salty and spicy. And I know she had, one of her cousins over for dinner before she, when she was still cooking a lot. And she said that she could not believe that they had the nerve to take the skin off after all the work she did. That's where all the flavor was. And I wanted to tell her, Grandma, I take the skin off before I put the breading on, and I probably wouldn't eat your breading either, but
Or
we loved it as
Yes,
children. The
yes.
skin was the best part. That's what she worked on.
And when you'd ask her, well, how do you make that, Grandma? Oh, nothing to it. I don't write anything down, just, just throw a few things together. Even today, she makes some of the best soups. And I was talking to Joni at the shower, Grandma, and this seems to be a real big part of their lives. Whenever anyone came over, you always offered them food. Grandma always fed us. We hadn't been in the door half an hour and she'd be cooking and making sure we had a meal prepared. But when Aunt Joni stopped by, Grandma, of course, brought the soup out, and it was a lentil soup, tomatoes. And Aunt Joni said, this is the best soup, Mom, how do you make this? I don't know, you just throw a few things in the pot.
Let it simmer.
She was never one to make a big deal about what she did. So,
Do you remember when she came to Glenwood when I lived in that flat and you came over?
yes.
And we had her make kolache bread.
to show
And
us
she,
how.
to show us how, in my kitchen, she said, this is the best place for you to learn, in your own kitchen. And we just brought her over there. And you copied a lot of the recipes and they'd say, put in a cold place.
Yes.
They didn't have refrigeration and they're just so vague.
We had to ask her for translation of a lot of the entries in those recipes because they just didn't match up with anything that we knew.
You know really what yeast cakes were,
Yeah.
Or to make a sponge.
Yeah, make us fun. We'll go, you know.
Now we know.
Yeah, we had to
didn't
start
at the
from
time.
scratch. Or things were measured and not only in a pinch, but in a fistful. We had to just grab a fistful and put it in. Oh, well. Yeah, that's something we'd always measured everything in tablespoons or portions of a cup. But Grandma and Grandpa, I think, were really attached. Really attached to one another. I think it was very, very hard for Grandma and Grandpa.
A long time ago.
60, early 60s.
Sounds like John's.
Yeah. And Grandma Gillis, not too many people have seen her. I know, we did. Hi, Gregory.
Hi.
Hi, John.
Oh, John. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Greg, you want some pizza?
There's a lot of things there.
Man.
to say.
Greg, come here.
Yeah, Greg used to come quite often when we were small. He died in March of 2001.
Yeah, I think he died before us, or just when I was
60.
Very trim, very much in shape.
I don't know if I recognize him from pictures. We have some old pictures, by the way, that our mom sent me, that we need you to learn to,
Yes.
because there's some that's already running in the background. Yeah, so
Sure.
go through it. You wanna carry on, you wanna
We can stop.
take a break?
Yeah, let's take a break.